Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. It's not always easy maintaining your interest in UFOs and pursuing the topic. And I, like many others, sometimes I get frustrated and I tend to lose interest. But every so often, I run across a case or two that reinvigorates my interest and my pursuit of the truth. These cases just ring true, and the witnesses involved come across as very honest. They do not go on to write a book or go on social media and become celebrities. They simply go on with their lives. And these, for me, are some of the more believable cases. I'll also be showing Bob Lazar, who I've always thought to be one of the more credible whistleblowers, and some of his testimony. Stay tuned. I'm hoping to pique your interest and reinvigorate your interest in UFOs. I'd like to start out with a military photographer who took pictures at the Area 51 Roswell crash. I came across this on X, and it's a post from Wow at Wow369-32525. And it has to do with a military photographer who took pictures of the alien bodies found fallen near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And the post has them quoted as saying, "I photographed the aliens at Roswell." There's also an article by Anthony Bragalia on UFO explorations, original research, independent reporting. Okay, so I'm just going to read the bullet points from the article by Anthony Bragalia. And of course, has to do with a military photographer who took pictures of alien bodies found near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And the first bullet point says, he received sudden and urgent orders in early July 1947, shortly after the crash, to immediately fly to Roswell Army Airfield, which was a 3-hour flight from where he was stationed. He flew in a B-25 bomber, accompanied by a Corporal Al Kirkpatrick. Upon landing, he was driven an hour and a half north of Roswell, where he observed a covered truck carrying some type of unusual wreckage. Further, he was taken to a desert site where tents had been erected. He observed other photographers on the scene. He was ordered inside one of the tents to begin taking pictures. He observed 4 small humanoid bodies, nearly all identical. They had large heads, darkish complexions, and very thinly constructed bodies. They had been placed on the ground, wrapped in rubber tarp material. The picture taking was sharply supervised by an officer who did not want the photographer to make sustained observation of the creatures. His photographs and equipment were then confiscated, and he was debriefed that he was to say nothing of the event as a matter of national security. And this is a picture of him right there. This is a videotape that accompanies the article.
There was a hell of a lot of people down there, military with trash trucks going around picking up, I guess, parts that were scattered on the ground.
Benthal says he and 2 other photographers, chosen from different military units, had been flown to Roswell Army Airfield.
And there was several of us doing photography work, I imagine. I saw 2 or 3 of them. But I don't know where they come from. I don't know what happened to them.
From the airbase, they'd been driven out to the desert in a covered truck. When Buck Sergeant Benthal climbed off the truck, he found himself in the midst of a large military operation with special equipment, more than 50 soldiers, plus several majors and colonels.
Well, I'm not going to show the whole tape, but if you guys want to see it, it's on this article by Anthony Bragalia. And the title of the article, online article, is UFO Explorations, original research, independent reporting. And the name of the photographer is Frederick Benthall. He was a 26-year-old sergeant and a photographic specialist in the Army at the time. I also saw a short videotape of a family in Wisconsin that was very believable and helped renew my interest in what's going on with UFOs. Check it out.
A chill morning in Mellon, Wisconsin. Quiet fear happened on the Mellontown Road. Something that would have seemed incredible if it hadn't happened to people as down-to-earth as the town of Mellon itself. Philip Baker works in a mill on the same job for more than 20 years. He's grown up here and planting and harvesting his own crops for cutting wood to warm the house in the long Wisconsin winters. He was an officer in his union once, but stepped down because it meant too much time away from his wife Shirley and their kids, Monty, Jeff, Jane, and John. The most important things to the Baker family are hard work and being together. They were together the most incredible night of their lives. It was March 13, 1975.
I was carrying the two cats. I was walking to the garage. And I got by this corner, right by the house here. And I looked, and there was this weird object, funny noises, and it was really bright, and I didn't know what I should do. So I was going back and forth, and finally I threw the cat in the garage. And then I ran to the house around the corner, and I couldn't get the door open.
When I first saw it, I was standing approximately right here, but I couldn't get too good of a view of it because the brush and the trees are in the way. So then I went back into the house, and I got my coat on. My two youngest boys and Jane were following me. We went over here to get a better look at the object that was sitting on the road. And my curiosity still wanted me to get a better view of it. So we walked down. Of course, the ground was covered with snow. And my car was sitting here in the driveway. And of course, there were snowbanks on the side of the roads. And there's where I got my estimate of the size of the object, approximately 12 feet in diameter, but also with the markings in the snow. And I would judge the object at the center of it was approximately 6 feet high. It was like a turtle. My two boys and my girl started to proceed here closer. My girl told me not to go any closer to it. She ran back in the house.
He was going to go walking up to it, and I went back to the house and told my mom that he was going to go up there and get closer to it. And she came out and she yelled at him.
My wife came out and hollered at me and told me not to be foolish and go any closer to it, not knowing exactly what the object was on the road. And of course I did get a very good view of it from here, as there was nothing blocking my vision on the road. Montgomery was looking out the upstairs windows where he got his view of the object.
And we went in the house and we called the deputy sheriff. And when the deputy said hello, there was a boom and it was gone. I went out and I couldn't see it anymore.
The sheriff came and he saw nothing. That can be a pretty lonely feeling, to have witnessed something incredible and be unable to produce evidence. Loneliest of all, perhaps, for the Baker children. They would want to tell their story to friends at school. But who would believe them?
Oh, Monty, my oldest boy, he was all upset. He told my other two boys, now don't say anything. Don't say anything to kids at school. We don't want nothing of this to get out. And, of course, Janie was in tears. She says, well, I know what I saw. She says, you trying to tell me I'm crazy or something? She says, I know what we saw. She says, don't try to tell me I didn't see anything, because she said, I know I saw it. And she was in tears and everything else that night. And, of course, the undersheriff, I apologized when he left me off here, because I thought, well, now we didn't find anything. He said, he'll think I'm a little off, too. And he said, no, don't forget, just forget about it. I said, well, okay, let's forget about it. And I said, but don't tell anybody then. Matter of fact, I even mentioned him. I said, don't tell anybody. I said, just forget it then. Because I said, let's drop the whole story.
Mellon has a newspaper, the Weekly Record. Editor Jasper Landry knows just about everybody in Mellon by first name.
I've known Mr. Baker for about 30 years, and he and his family have been here a long time. And when this story broke on the UFOs, he asked me not to put it in the paper because of the anxiety his family was being put through by callers and curiosity seekers. And so I thought that I wouldn't. And he was very appreciative. I honored his wish to not have it printed.
The story got around anyway. Of this country lane where the Baker family saw something big and metallic with red and green lights. Something that was gone almost as soon as it came.
My name's George Ree, Mellon, Wisconsin. I am the undersheriff of Ashland County. On this night in question, I answered a complaint of Philip Baker, and I arrived at the site and I investigated it, and I firmly believe that the Baker family did see an object.
Sheriff Ree had good reason to believe Baker's story. He may have arrived at the Baker house too late to see anything there. But when he left, a second call came to investigate reported lights in the sky. Ree and 7 deputies from 2 counties raced across country roads. Sheriff Ree would sight a bright object darting in the sky, call on his radio for another car to intercept it, and the object would dart away, sometimes to briefly join another hovering in the sky. One of Ree's deputies said the light given off by the objects was so intense he could read a newspaper by it, and when it passed over another patrol car, the police radio went dead. To this moment, no one knows what it was that George Ree and 7 county policemen chased that night in Wisconsin.
Okay, so that was the Baker family's UFO encounter back in 1975 in Mellon, Wisconsin. And there were no theatrics there. Very down-to-earth family. And they didn't even want publicity. They asked the local newspaper not to print their story. The next story that I'm about to show is believable because of the father involved. He's so honest, and everyone else is honest about the situation. It is a bit bizarre. It involves a UFO being spotted with a Cessna plane attached to its side. Check this out. Okay, so I found this on Reddit, and the post is by r/UFOB, Remsey2907. Okay, so without further ado.
October 21st, 1978. 20-year-old Frederick Valentic took off to fly 120 miles from Melbourne, Australia, across the Bass Strait to King Island. Valentic was scheduled to pick up some fish for a small market that employed him. Despite his youth, he was experienced enough to be a flight instructor, and Frederick Valentic had flown this route many times before.
Delta Sierra Juliet, pilot to ground. Is there any known aircraft in my vicinity below 5,000 feet?
Delta Sierra Juliet. Negative, no known traffic.
Delta Sierra Juliet. There seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000 feet.
Delta Sierra Juliet. What type of aircraft?
I cannot confirm, but it's 4 bright lights that appear to be landing lights. Unknown aircraft have just passed over me, about 1,000 feet.
Is large aircraft confirmed?
Delta Sierra Juliet, affirmative at the speed it's traveling. Are there any RAAF aircraft in the vicinity?
Negative. Confirm you can't identify aircraft.
Affirmative. Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne. It's approaching from due east of me. It seems to be playing some sort of game, flying at a speed I can't estimate.
Stephen Roby, air traffic controller on duty then, explains the reported UFO's movement.
Times and coming from various directions. And then he started orbiting, and the aircraft was orbiting above him. And on several occasions he sort of stated that towards the end it wasn't an aircraft, and he described it as having a sort of a green light on it, and also it appeared to be a sort of a silver metallic colour.
Delta Sierra Juliet. What is your altitude?
Delta Sierra Juliet, 4,500 feet.
Sierra Juliet. Confirm you can't identify aircraft.
Affirmative. It's not an aircraft, it's...
we expected.
Guido Valentic is Frederick's father.
Night, he's supposed to join us with friends where we went for some movie, family movie projection. And that night, he never turned up. He didn't ring up. Normally, he's always, when he go for a trip, when he return at the airport, he normally would have called us, you know, I'll be home after an hour or so. But that night, it was quite strange, you know. We didn't know anything about it. We got home about 11 o'clock and he wasn't home. My wife then started to worry about it. And so, you know, I said, oh, this is too late to start inquiry.
Can you describe it? Delta Sierra Juliet. It's flying past. It has a long shape. Cannot identify more than that. Coming for me right now.
And he described it as being of a long shape, and as I said before, a silver colour with the various lights on it. And he actually did say it wasn't an aircraft. So it's very strange.
It appears to be stationary. I'm orbiting. The thing, it's orbiting on top of me. There's a green light and a sort of metallic light on the outside. It seems to have vanished now.
Confirm it has vanished.
Affirmative. Do you know what sort of aircraft I've got? Is it military?
No military traffic in this area.
It was 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. Nothing still happening. I couldn't see any sign of him, and I was just about to get up and maybe get on the phone, where all of a sudden a couple of uniformed blue slack-legged walk in the front door, and at that time we realized immediately that something was wrong.
Delta Sierra Juliet. Engine is rough idling and coughing.
Delta Sierra Juliet, what are your intentions?
Proceeding King Island. Delta Sierra Juliet. Unknown aircraft now hovering on top of me.
Finally, we lost contact with him in a very strange way. The communications he was putting out seemed to break. People describe it as a sort of a metallic sound, the last transmission that was sent from Delta Sierra Juliet.
Delta Sierra Juliet. Acknowledge.
Do you read me? Do you read me? Delta Sierra Juliet. Repeat. Do you read me?
Despite an extensive 4-day search, which included using a sophisticated Orion aircraft capable of detecting any sort of debris at great ocean depths, not a single scrap of wreckage was ever found. No hard evidence ever turned up that would explain the disappearance of Frederick Valentic. But theories abound.
Some say that Valentic became disoriented and saw this lighthouse. A second theory is that he saw lights of fishing vessels and then, becoming disoriented, spiraled his plane into the ocean. Guido Valentic, Frederick's father, believes otherwise.
Well, after Frederick reported this UFO incident, I inclined to think that it could be some intelligent life in the outer space, despite all the officials are trying to suppress this, really makes me very confused, because knowing Frederick what he radiated and knowing my son wouldn't make himself so ridiculous in stating things like that. So I'm inclined to believe that really must be something in the space that the general population may not aware to be. And I realized after his disappearance, which I couldn't have the opportunity before, how many calls I get from various parts of the world. And they really encouraged me to believe that he could be still alive. I'm a bit with another intelligence in space.
There were some witnesses that came out and gave testimony afterward. There was a plumber by the name of Roy Manifold that took this picture just before Valentich's plane disappeared. A blob, but you can't really tell what it is. There was also a nearby farmer that saw something as well, which I thought was very interesting. And this is the part where the story of the Cessna plane being stuck on the UFO comes out from this particular farmer supposedly witnessed that.
The most interesting one of the lot is this farmer, that he was baling hay and he said the bearing in the baler started to scream and make a noise, and he'd been having trouble with it, and he thought, oh no, not this again. So he stopped, put the baler out of gear, dismounted from the tractor and turned round, and the baler had stopped and the noise was still going. And he said, I was trying to come to grips with this for a minute, and he said, then I became aware of a shadow and looked up, and he said I was under a big saucer, he called it. And he said, going from the length of the bale on the tractor, it would have been 90 feet in diameter. And it was kind of, and as he's flown in aircraft and he gets his crops done, he knows when an aircraft's about to stall, and he thought, shit, this thing's going to drop on me. And he ran out beside the paddock, out from underneath it, looking up, and he said, looking up under it, it kind of came in and went up. But the most remarkable part was, all around the edge, well, he said, that's what it looked like underneath, but there were two rows of them. If you blink, you could see one row, which is rotating very fast, but the other one wasn't. And it was rotating in the opposite direction, but very slow. You could see it quite plainly. And he said, as it moved slowly along, it kind of came up like that, but there was a piece sticking up out of the top, like a dome, and round the bottom of the dome appeared to be a black seal of some kind. That's what he took it to be, like a weather seal or something. And he said the dome had like a church door in it with an arched top, but no windows that he could see, and no handle on the door or anything. And he said on what he took to be the rear of it, there was slight protrusions that he would call rudders. Two big round holes, and he said there was shimmering heat coming out of one, and the other one there were little spurts of flame coming out of it, and he gained the impression that one engine wasn't working, you know, because one disc wasn't spinning. And then, as he cleared it, he said the most remarkable thing of all, there was a Cessna airplane stuck to the side of it.
Just in case you guys didn't hear that, this audio just said that there was a Cessna plane attached to the side of it, and I apologize for the background noise. There's not much I can do about it. This is actually a friend or a neighbor of the farmer who actually witnessed the Cessna attached to the side of this UFO that is speaking now.
The whole airplane? The whole airplane, yeah. He said the airplane, the tops of the wings were flat against the side of it, and the tail was kind of hanging down, a bit clear of the edge. And he said there were no chains or ropes or anything like that visible. And I think he said there was some oil running down the side of the Cessna, and he thought this may have been ingested if there was an air intake underneath or something, because heat and flame coming out would suggest air burning, wouldn't it? Yeah. And the interesting thing is, it was the day following when that plane went missing between Victoria and Tasmania. Right. You know, when that one, he rang up and said there were lights around him and all kinds of things. Yeah. He said, anyhow, he said, this thing moved off in the direction of where the military manoeuvres were. He said it kind of went over the ridge. He said the last he saw of it with this high-pitched sound.
Okay, sorry about the audio problems there. There wasn't much that I could do about it. But I thought that the father was very believable in his testimony. And even though the story is a bit bizarre about the plane being attached to the UFO at the end, I don't think anybody's really trying to get any attention there. And I thought that overall it was pretty believable. That was Leonard Nimoy speaking in both the incidents in Wisconsin and in this last one, which took place in Australia. Both incidents took place in the mid to late 70s. Going to move on now and show some testimony of Bob Lazar on the Joe Rogan show and how he talks about his experiences at Area 51. And he mainly concentrates on the physical, technical aspects of the UFO phenomenon. He's pretty honest about not wanting to be associated with the spiritual or mystical aspects of ufology. And that's understandable. That makes him a bit more credible. He's not after the fame. He's just interested in the technology. Okay, so this was taken from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast show. He's interviewing Bob Lazar.
Now, I'm not in, believe it or not, I'm not into UFOs. I don't follow stories or,
Even after your experiences?
No, I'm fascinated with the technology, and it irks me like every night I go to sleep that, that prevented me from continuing on in the project is so alluring to me.
Right.
But that there's aliens or where they come from, I mean, the prize is the technology, and that's what I'm fascinated by. But so I don't listen. I mean, he's the guy that has the contacts and tries to thread everything together. And what he recently told me is he found, I don't know, is either documentation or people that he spoke to. It's that the existence of this project, the project that I was on, it's something that they seem to take out every 8 or 10 years.
So that's a very specific memo, and this is actually, this is the first time I'll be very clear with people about it. It's a big topic of conversation right now. It's called the Wilson Memo.
Okay, so this is Jeremy Corbell. He was very instrumental in getting David Grush out and into the congressional hearings. He's also a well-known ufologist and researcher. He's going to be talking about the Admiral Wilson Memo, which is a conspiracy theory that's been going around for years in the UFO community.
You can look it up. Admiral Wilson met with a scientist who's actually was featured in one of my films. Everybody has been debating whether or not this document of a conversation with a sitting admiral at the time is a real document. It's an actual conversation that happened, and this document is real. Everybody wants to know. The world is going crazy right now in the UFO world. I'll tell you straight up right now, I'm in the position to know, and it is a real document, that it is real. Test to every...
You're not being very clear.
Sure.
Please.
No problem. So there was a document that is circulating right now that is really big. It's going around everywhere. People are asking and wondering.
What is this document?
It's called the Wilson Memo, is how you can find it online, or the Wilson Leak. So Admiral Wilson meets with this scientist, and they have this discussion, oddly enough, at special projects at EG&G. And if I remember, the document is from 2001. I'm telling everybody right now, it's real. And we'll see. My history is pretty good with saying if something's real or not, right? So here we go. The document comes out. They meet at EG&G special projects. In 1989, they stumble into a problem. This happens. They put the technology away, and then they bring it back out and see if material science has caught up and if they can make any progress. So this document kind of talks about this process. The big thing I get from it, and a lot of it's vindicating to Bob, and one of the things it's vindicating, besides the EG&G thing, is that private industry, so this guy's an admiral, and he says, I found out about your SAP, your Special Access Program. I need to know about it. And he's going to a private part of industry, and he is denied access. And he says, I should be running this program. And they were able to deny him access. So I think the takeaway here is, check it out. I'm telling you that is an actual correct, that is a leak. Now, everything said in that document, I don't know.
What are you talking about? What is said in that document specifically?
It's between a scientist and an admiral that are sitting, and they're having a meeting, and they're talking about the search for the UFO subject, the search to get Special Access Program access to all of these different things, like reverse engineering programs. So in this document, they talk about it. I believe that this document, the person that went was employed by Robert Bigelow, one of the guys that has a couple of orbiting satellites and all that stuff.
He's the guy who owns Skinwalker Ranch.
No, he's not.
No?
He was the guy that owned
He used to
Skinwalker.
own it. Okay.
Yeah, he used to own it. There's a new owner, and I interviewed him for my other film, but there's a new owner, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that soon. But like it'll just there's stuff that you'll be hearing about Skinwalker Ranch soon because there's a new owner. Anyway, the whole point of this insertion here is just that document kind of validates a lot of this idea Bob just said, that they make a little progress, then they can't go anywhere. They tuck it away, and then they bring it back out, 10 years later and start working on it. What is the limiting factor? I think Bob should speak on this, but it's the material science.
Yeah, it's really where physics is. So I can see them doing that. I mean, I didn't have any information on that, but I think what George uncovered is probably accurate. That we try and do what we can, and once we reach a roadblock and we really can't figure it out, it's just friggin' wait, put the thing away, wait for science to catch up. And
so this is a continuing narrative going around the UFO community, and Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell are proponents of that narrative, that we do have ET technology or UFO tech from crashed saucers, but that we haven't been able to figure it out.
A decade later, let's take the project out again and see, all right, now where can we go?
But there's got to be someone who remains informed, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you've got your scientists like you and Barry. You got your people that you compartmentalize. You got these people working on this
there
project.
has to be some people that know everything.
You've got security, and then someone's going to be on the outside saying, hey, we need people to guard this building. Don't let anybody in for 10 years.
I think a lot of that is private industry, and I think that's how they keep it. Yeah, I think that's how they because the government is just so leaky. I think that's kind of what they're doing.
That's what the document kind of proves. You just articulated that it is in control of private industry.
What private industry? Some aerospace company, something?
I don't know.
Yeah, the admiral wouldn't name it in the car in the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So they still have these things, supposedly.
I would guess. I mean, I don't have any information on that.
Have you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got them or how they got them?
No, but something must have been said to me, but it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig.
Okay, this is where he says that at least one of the craft at Area 51 was discovered as part of an archaeological dig. And what I love about Bob Lazar is that when he doesn't know something, he doesn't elaborate or try and make it up. He just says straight out that he doesn't know, and that makes him even that much more believable. Let's listen in on what he has to say about this.
So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Right?
As all of it would, yeah.
That tripped me out when he said that for the first time.
Yeah, that's a freak out right there. Just a couple of dudes with some brushes looking for a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone and hit metal.
And when did they find it? That they have 9 of them.
Yeah. Well, and how could we have not heard about that? What about the guys with the brushes? How could you uncover something like that? And
Joe's newspaper at home does.
What is this here, Jamie?
This is the document, but I had to do some digging to find it.
Yes, it's just kind of... Yeah, so this is where they meet at EG&G, and this is Admiral Wilson, and there's a lot more coming out. Now, I want to be clear, George didn't put this out. He didn't leak this out to anybody. This is, I can tell you how
Who recorded this conversation?
Okay, so while they were speaking, I guess Joe Rogan's assistant looked up the Wilson leak, and this is what he got, or the Wilson memo.
So this was an employee of, at the time, Robert Bigelow.
And this is in 2002?
Right. Do you remember when he had that government contract called OSAP, the world all knows about now, and he had NIDS that studied the ranch? So that $22 million, everybody is saying it was for ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The $22 million was for OSAP that was pushed through Congress, 3 congressmen, right, an astronaut. It was pushed through. But anyway, this program... this is what was the mother program, so it got the $22 million, and really it was to study Skinwalker Ranch, oddly enough.
That's funny. That's a big reveal that the $22 million that was earmarked for ATIP actually went to Bob Bigelow while he was doing research at Skinwalker Ranch.
22 million all was inspired by the phenomenon they were seeing at Skinwalker Ranch, because the scientists, they're seeing vehicles come through like a space in the sky. I'm saying there were scientists hired by the government, right, through Bigelow to study the ranch because they thought it was important. And, you know, the point is that 22 million was to study that. Then we have ATIP, which is like an auxiliary kind of program of military sightings, like Commander Fravers and that sort of thing. This document is just one of those things that has now come forward that through the Bigelow studies, it was government funded, and then it was personally funded and then government funded. It's just one of those things that kind of shakes you, because you got this military guy who can't get access because of the private industry that's holding these non-terrestrial materials, that they can't study it. So that's the claim right now. Give it some time, let people dig more into this.
Okay, so now during the same Joe Rogan interview, Bob Lazar goes on to describe the inside of a craft that he was able to get into.
What are you thinking when you're inside of it? Like, what are you seeing?
It's a very ominous feeling, because there are no, first of all, everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took, I've said this before, somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature where two items meet. It's a really weird looking thing, but there was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly, to pick on it, a way to describe it.
Okay, so now we know from Bob Lazar talking to Joe Rogan that one of the craft is very ancient because it was part of an archaeological dig. And we know that because he read that on some classified paperwork that he was given at Area 51 during his orientation. We also know what the inside of the craft feels like and looks like because Bob Lazar actually went inside of one. But now, later on during the same interview, Bob Lazar actually talks about where the occupants or the pilots of this craft might be from. And he read this from some paperwork that he was given during his orientation as well.
So there was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. Now, how they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. So there was no other information about it other than that's supposedly where the craft came from. Now, is that true? I don't know. I have no way of verifying that, but that was printed in the same materials that referenced the reactor. Now, I looked that stuff up when I went home, and Zeta Reticuli is a binary star, two stars that orbit one another, and it's only visible in the southern hemisphere, and it's about 30 some odd light years away. So that's literally all the information I have about that. I don't know how they found out it came from there.
And you also probably have some suspicions that they give you some disinformation like you were talking about before, where they would... I mean, if you ever decided to talk about this, they added a bunch of nonsense to make whatever is factual look ridiculous.
Right.
When you read Zeta Reticuli, were you like, what in the fuck is this?
Well, reading all of the stuff, it was, what in the fuck is this?
You're like, why did I sign up for this? Like, what?
No, to me, this was cool. This was interesting. I said, I was just excited to be out in a secure area, in the middle of the desert. I said, this is awesome.
How old were you at the time?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, so you're probably totally geeked out.
Oh, yeah. This was great. I mean, I was excited. So I didn't care. I'm reading through everything. And
so you read through all the Zeta Reticuli thing, but then when you see the actual starship with the little American flag sticker on it.
Well, was
that later or before?
That was before.
So before. So you see the thing before and you say, oh, this is American.
Wait, what's that before?
Hard, so many years.
Yeah, I can't.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
The days have fused together. It's so hard to separate what happened in each visit to the place.
Do you remember the thought process?
Okay, that's what I love about Bob Lazar. He's honest. When he doesn't remember something, he'll openly admit it. And I want you guys to take a look at this star system of the Zeta Reticuli and how it is almost a complete duplicate of something that Betty Hill drew years before in 1964. Remember, Betty and Barney Hill were abducted back in 1964. It's one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic, abduction cases. And after her examination, Betty Hill had a conversation with one of the ETs, and the ET told her where they were from. And from that conversation, Betty Hill drew this map. And if you look at it, and this is her original sketch, it's almost identical to the star map that's being shown here of the Zeta Reticuli system. How would she know that without any prior education in astronomy? There's a close-up of it. Here's a close-up of the actual star map that was being shown during the Joe Rogan show. You can see how it's exactly like. It's the same map, in other words, as the one that Betty and Barney Hill drew. And Bob Lazar said that he saw paperwork which mentioned that one of the UFOs that he saw was from the Zeta Reticuli system. And we know that the two stars, Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli, are located over 35 light years from Earth. The stars orbit a common center of gravity over a period that is likely more than 170,000 Earth years, and are thought to be between 1.5 and 3 billion years old. Now, what makes these stars really interesting is that, relatively speaking, they are much like our own star, making them so-called solar analogs, and an interest to astronomers who can compare them to our own solar system's host star, or our sun. So Bob Lazar there said, and I quote, "There was some paperwork that indicated that this UFO was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. How they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea," end quote. And I thank him for his honesty. And the comparison is between the map shown during that interview with Joe Rogan and Bob Lazar and the map that Betty Hill drew back in 1961 of the Zeta Reticuli star system after her alleged abduction, even though she had no prior knowledge of astronomy. I just thought that that was corroborating evidence to what Betty Hill claimed back in the 1960s, that we are being visited by ETs from the Zeta Reticuli system. I hope that that, plus the two UFO encounters that I showed prior, the one in Wisconsin with the Baker family and the one in Australia, I hope those help refuel your interest in UFOs. Interest in UFOs has its ebbs and flows. Sometimes there are exciting moments. Sometimes there's a lull in the action. I got into this during the Chinese balloon incident about a year and a half ago. And then there was the UAP hearings this past year with David Grush. And there was a lot of excitement. Now there's a bit of a lull, and I'm sure that things will pick up again. They're supposed to be, according to Tim Burchett and Representative Luna, that have been pushing for UAP transparency, they're saying that there should be more hearings coming this fall in September or October. So hang in there, guys. I know that sometimes it's hard to maintain your interest, but eventually we'll get at the truth. My name is Al Barrows, and this has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my podcast.